Good morning and welcome to World News here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. As peaceful protests continue unabated in Georgia, the journalistic community is being intimidated by brutal police beatings. Let's listen to a message from one of the protesters.
We don't have a police, police is beating us, police is ignoring how some people are getting terribly beaten up by some random people and
yeah, but why should we be here?
Because you're nobody is watching the watcher, so we need the rest of the world to watch us. Now, for example, if you were not here, they would be it would be so easy to just take us. You see how many police officers are here, for one person in Georgia, there are 20 cars of police. We need attention to survive because we're doing our best to make this change.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a very honest question. So what happened to the Georgian journalists tonight? Do you think that would happen to a journalist from Reuters, from BBC,
No,
or from Polish public television?
We're going to give you helmets, though.
We have helmets. We have protection, but still. Do you think that there is a risk to our lives and well-being for covering this?
No.
Or do you think that foreign journalists are treated a little bit differently?
Of course they are. And whenever you're here, maybe those, when they see you as a foreigner, they're not that tough and aggressive in doing what they're doing because...
Pro-EU demonstrators have been protesting nearly non-stop for over a week and are showing no signs of stopping. Let's catch a glimpse of these demonstrations coming to us straight from TVP World's correspondent team in Georgia. Violence being perpetrated by the police in Georgia. Syrian rebels claim they have taken control over the country's capital, Damascus. Crowds of rebels on the streets of the city celebrating as they claimed a Syrian president has fled the country, reportedly to Russia. We're going now live to our guest, Eli Carmen. He's Senior Research Fellow from the International Institute for Counter-Terrorism. Welcome, sir, to TVP World, and thank you for taking the time.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good morning. A pleasure as always. Now, who are the insurgents? What do we know about them?
There are two coalitions. One is the main one, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, which actually is led by a former Al-Qaeda faction, and the leader is Abu Muhammad al-Juriani. And it fought since 2013-14 the Syrian regime. The other, and he is, by the way, governing the Idlib province for the last 7-8 years. And so he has some kind of exercise of power in a Syrian region. The second one is a coalition of former Syrian soldiers which have defected from the army, but they have also members of various tribes and Arab groups, including Turkmens, which are practically controlled and directed by the Turkish regime or the Turkish state. I would say even personally by the president of Turkey, Erdogan, which several days ago had held success to this coalition, and now he is one of the victors of this revolution, a tectonic change in the region, in Syria itself and in the region.
You call this a tectonic change, Mr. Carmen, and I'm sure it is. But with so many differing groups involved, what do we see for Syria going forward? Do we expect to see stability in that country?
For the beginning, clearly, there will be a lot of chaos. It's a revolution. And besides the revolutionary, if you want, two coalitions, there are the Kurds, which control 25% of the territory, which are fighting for autonomy, at least. And the Druze in the south, which for the last year have also fought the regime and succeeded in keeping the intelligence and military army outside of their region in Sweda and in the Kunetra region. So this is a patchwork of communities, and we don't speak about the Alawis, which are on the whole coast of Syria, and they controlled by the regime, through the regime, practically for the last 50 years, the fate of the Syrian people. So we'll see if the leadership, especially of the HTS, which for the moment seems to be quite controlling their troops, and not excessive violence, because the Syrian army also crumbled. Many of their soldiers flew to either to the coast or to Iraq. So it will take time until there will be a coalition to form a government and to decide what kind of regime the Syrian people want. And all the powers around are involved, first of all.
Well, clearly we'll be watching very closely, Mr. Carmen, but just very briefly, sir. Now, clearly Russia and Iran have been caught on the back foot. Their influence in Syria and perhaps even in the region seems to be under threat. What's behind that, and how do you expect them to respond?
Now, if we speak of Russia, he has lost one of the main strategic strongholds that it had in the Eastern Mediterranean, because the Tartus harbor in Syria is the base of the Russian fleet, which is fighting, if you want, or confronting the NATO fleet and the NATO nations. So because of the war in Iraq, and because many of their pilots, they were transferred from Syria to fight in Ukraine, they couldn't and cannot support really the regime. And the Iranians have lost the most important ally. Since 1980, they are allies with this regime, which permitted them to take control of Hezbollah in Lebanon. So the axis was called the axis of resistance of Iran as a result of the loss of the Hezbollah power in Lebanon by Israel, and also some of the losses they have, again, by Israel inside Syria itself. These are breaking the axis of resistance of Iran. So the Iranian regime is today in a very weak position, and I hope that this revolution could influence even internally the Iranian regime.
Understood. Mr. Carmen, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much for your analysis. Have a good day, sir.
Thank you. All the best.
Bye-bye. The presidential elections in Romania, scheduled for this Sunday, are called off following the decision of the Constitutional Court made on Friday to nullify them out of concerns of Russian interference. Our correspondent, Pavel Chaskovsky, is on site. Pavel, tell us, please, what are the latest developments?
Well, I'm standing in front of one of the schools in Bucharest, where Romanians were supposed to vote in the final leg of their electoral marathon, this time in the second round of presidential elections. They were supposed to vote, but they won't, following the Friday's decision of the Constitutional Court to nullify the results of the first round of presidential elections because of malign Russian interference into the electoral process in Romania. This means that the electoral process, the elections of the new president will start from scratch, and that the current president of Romania, Klaus Iohannis, who has already served 2 terms as Romanian president and was about to conclude his presidency just before Christmas, will most likely remain in power until the new president is elected. This is at least what Iohannis announced later in the week, and Iohannis emerges as the central figure able to help resolve the current political crisis in Romania. First of all, he was the one to declassify the report indicating Russian influence in the elections. And also, he should be the one to convene the new parliament. The new parliament, which, let me remind you, was elected exactly a week ago. And in the country's general election, the parties that compose the current ruling coalition, the Social Democrats and the National Liberals, scored about 40% of support. And along with 2 more parties, the Union of Hungarians in Romania and the centrist USR party, prior to today's second round of presidential elections, which is not happening, formed a pro-European, pro-Euro-Atlantic coalition, which together got more than 60% of support. And it is most likely that Iohannis will nominate one of the candidates from these 4 parties to become the future prime minister. And this prime minister should then form a government that will be tasked with organizing the next presidential results. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Pavel. Obviously, lots of moving pieces, and I'm sure you'll be keeping on top of all of this for our audience. Have a good day. Leaders from across the world, including U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, gathered in Paris on Saturday night for the reopening of Notre Dame Cathedral. Before the ceremony, Trump sat down with President Volodymyr Zelenskyy for what could prove to be a crunch meeting for Ukraine. Our correspondent, Angela Skujins, is in Paris and has more.
The first Mass since the Notre Dame Cathedral has been reborn kicks off in Paris with an invite-only list expected to bow their head in prayer with a service led by the country's Archbishop. Now, it comes 5 years after a fire almost tore down the 860-year-old building. Now, firefighters that fought that deadly blaze, as well as the donors that found 800 million euros to restore the building, will be in attendance. French President Emmanuel Macron is also scheduled to make an appearance. It follows on from hours before, where the who's who of international politics descended on the French capital to attend a day's worth of ceremonies to signify the rebirth of this iconic structure. This included US President-elect Donald Trump, as well as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, as well as 50 other heads of state. Now, at 6:30, the Notre Dame Cathedral will be reopened to the public and signifying this iconic French landmark being returned to the people of Paris. This is Angela Skujins in Paris for TVP World.
Poland's idea of introducing Baltic Sea patrols could help Europe tackle the hybrid threats coming from Russia. TVP World hosted the former Polish ambassador to Finland to discuss whether the proposed patrols would be enough to prevent sabotage operations.
I think it's the right decision and the right proposal. We have a very similar example with air policing. Why not to move it also on the surface of the sea? Today we should show that we are ready. But I have no idea if this kind of activities, military or quasi-military activities, will be sufficient. I hope it will be. If the situation will escalate, we could, for example, block the Russian Baltic harbors.
And that's all from this news bulletin, but we will be back on the hour. See you then. Goodbye.